There's an entrepreneur named Dean Graziosi who I'm a big fan of, and he said something at an event I was at, which was that yes got you to where you are, but no will get you to where you're going. And one of the fundamentals of the less doing system, the organization fundamental, was all about setting artificially restrictive limits. And I truly believe that you cannot hustle and innovate at the same time. Because if you're in that go, go, go mode, then you're not stopping to see, like, what can I do with limited resources that I have? And quite honestly, there's something called the liberty paradox, which is basically the idea of positive freedom and negative freedom. Typically, when people are looking for freedom, initially they're looking for freedom from something. So freedom from the 9 to 5, freedom from the grind or the job. But eventually we want to get to a place where we have freedom to do something. We want to have the freedom to travel, the freedom to read a book a day, whatever it might be. So the only way to do that in most cases is to set artificially restrictive limits on yourself, because the truth is, if you're watching this video, then you probably live in relatively abundant times, and that's just the truth. So the problem with that is that when our brain is given too many options, too much space to sort of figure things out in, we get decision paralysis, essentially, and decision fatigue and overwhelm, and we can't make effective decisions. So we need to limit those things artificially. So I've always been a big believer in setting artificially restricted limits on your time, your money, your physical space. You might decide that in a closet, you're only allowed to use one shelf to have clothes on, and then what does that require you to do in terms of getting rid of all the other stuff? Same thing for money. If you knew that the average American spends about $173 a week on food, what if you were only able to spend $100? Would that mean that you would have to cook more or skip a meal? Hopefully not, or whatever it might be. So creating those limits creates almost like an extruder where we have to come up with new and innovative ideas to actually get that stuff done. So saying no is a really good example of that. And in my inbox zero system, which is the 3Ds of how you get to inbox zero, email management is really about decisions. It's about being able to make effective decisions and having pathways in place and limiting what those pathways are. So there's the 3Ds, and the first D is to delete it. But in the real world where you're making decisions about people wanting your time or reading something, whatever it might be, that's declining it or denying it. So you need to be able to say no in more situations than you say yes. Having less on your calendar, having less availability, saying no when somebody really important needs to have time with you will eventually free you up to do a lot more of the things that you want to do. And there's a lot of fear involved in this, the fear of missing out, the fear of losing a deal, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, if you're saying yes to someone else, then you are saying no to yourself. And putting yourself second will never work as a long-term plan. I'm not saying that you always have to be first, but actively putting yourself second eventually will come back to bite you, and the people around you will suffer from that. So learning how to say no is really good. One of the ways you can do that in terms of your time is by using a service like Calendly, for example. So if you have Calendly set up, which means that if somebody were to go to your Calendly link, they can see your availability in your calendar and book time with you. You want to create a limit on that. So you can make it so that Calendly will only show availability on Tuesdays and Thursdays, for example, or only between the hours of 9 and 12, or that things can't be booked within a half an hour of each other. So you end up having these big spaces, and that kind of limitation will be so eye-opening for you, because previously if somebody asked for your time, you might say, yeah, I'm free the whole next week on these hours, and it goes back and forth. The average number of emails required to schedule a meeting is 8.1, which is kind of ridiculous. In this situation, you say, yeah, here's my link. You pick any time that works for you. Now, in situation, you're giving the person the impression that they have some control, which is always good, even though they're going to be doing it within the corral of the time that you've set. And then you don't have to be involved in it, and you are the one controlling your time. The biggest thing to recognize here is that all of these tools that we have are meant to be yours to control and to use to your advantage. They're not meant to be leashes for the outside world to get a hold of you whenever you want. So setting those limits will not only allow you to just be pulled in less directions, but your brain will start to get into a mode where you're actually starting to batch those activities and do things more effectively because you're doing them in blocks. which always works better for us as human beings. But there's a lot of ways to say no. So one is, yeah, here's the schedule. So you can put somebody into some sort of scenario where there is a limit. So if that means that they can't book an appointment with you for 3 or 4 weeks, that's fine. If they're willing to wait 3 or 4 weeks to meet with you, then it's probably worth waiting for and important enough. You can say, I have to check with my partner. I have to check with my wife. Let me get back to you, whatever it might be. All of those are kinds of ways of saying no. Some are more gentle than others. But at the end of the day, in your head, you have to recognize that you are able to say no more often. And again, I would say that as a rule, you should be saying no more often than you're saying yes. Hey, thanks so much for watching my video. If you liked it and you want to see more, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share this video with anybody you think would benefit from a little more optimization, automation, and outsourcing in their life. Thanks a lot.